And hello and welcome. My name is Martin, and today what we'll be covering in this video is how to move around the Unreal environment as an editor, and also how to use our XYZ tool in different manners to be able to move objects around effectively on the screen. So the first thing that we'll do is we'll talk about how to actually move around in the editor as an editor. Let's say I wanted to swing around and see what this looks like from the other side. The first thing that you'd want to do is hold your left-right mouse click, and then if you use your then move your mouse around, you will see that this will allow you to be able to change your perspective from up, down, left, right, and you get to basically this is your world view kind of deal. Now if you release the right mouse click and hold the left mouse click, you will see that if I move my mouse forward, I'm actually moving forward in that world. So this basically allows me to move left, right, or left, right, forward, or backward within the world, and I can get around the world this way as well. So for us, if we were to now hold the left, if we go back to the right mouse key and we move this, if we use the WASD, we also get a very similar effect, right? But now I can move left and right as fast as I can move forward and backward, and I can actually change my angles very quickly because I can move both the mouse left, right, and change perspective, and then move in the direction or away from that perspective. So basically it keeps setting up what forward is. So as you look in that direction, that becomes forward. If I were to hold the D key, I go right from that perspective. If I hold and you can see that I can change perspective as I'm moving. So this allows you as an editor to be able to move around. And that is the difference between holding the right key by itself and stationarily moving your perspective, holding the left mouse key and moving left or right on the screen. That will move your actual physical location. And if you hold your right mouse click and do your WASD, you not only change perspective, but you also change your location in the world or in the editor. Now from there, the other kind of movement that we can do are the objects that are in the screen. So as you select an object, you'll see that you get this this tool, which has 3 points, and those 3 points represent your X, Y, and Z angles. And in the first selection of it, if it has these points on the top, what those points allow you to do is to be able to move that object in that dimension. So if I come here to the details panel and scroll down to where, there it is. So there is the location right there, and let me pull this out just a little bit more, and you'll see that as I move the Y, that angle or the numbers there change. If I grab the X, those numbers will now change, and if I grab the Y, those numbers will now change. Now the other thing that you can obviously do with this is that if we needed to, we could type numbers in. So if I wanted to move this to 700, I could do that. If I wanted to move it to 500, I could do that. So you can also move objects around by actually typing in their location. Well, if you needed to have things very precise, you could line things up very precisely using this without having to do a lot of moving around and getting then decimal numbers. The other thing that we can also do is you will see that there are these little bars that are connecting the two vertices. So if I grab that bar now and I move, I can now move this object in those two dimensions. So let me move back just a little bit. And there you see, I'm not moving on the y-axis because I do not have the y-axis selected. I'm only able to move in the x and the z-axis. Now if I grab this one, this would allow me to be able to move my x and y. And if I grab this one, I am now moving my y and z. So depending on whether you need to move something in two directions, you can grab it that way. Now the other type of movement that we can also do is grab the ball that's in the middle. So if you grab the ball that's in the middle, you will now notice that all three of the location beacons or information are now moving. So I'm able to actually move this object around in three-dimensional space if I grab the ball. So grab one, it moves it that location, that way, grab the bar in the middle between two vertices, you get to move it in 2 dimensions. Grab the ball in the middle, and you can move in all 3. Now, from there, the other thing that we can also do is as you try to line things up, you may eventually end up having something float and not be able to land, let's say, specifically on the floor. So you can see there that a little bit of this is now underneath the floor, and the way that we can tell that is because we see the edge here, but we also see the contours of the box, or the edges, the outlines of the box, and that is definitely has gone below the floor. And let's see, oh, well, can't see that through there. Okay, so we'll do it a different way. So trying to align objects together sometimes can be a pain. So there's a quick shortcut by hitting the End key on your keyboard, the END key. So if you hit that and you have an object selected, what it will do is it will look at the Z-axis of the or the bottom side of the object and align that with the surface of the other object. So now if I need to, I can grab this object and move it over here. And right now I would not be, and actually they are, yeah, you can see that they're overlapping. And I don't want them to overlap because they're separate objects. So I'm going to raise that object up a little bit higher. And because it is over this object, it should align with that object. Now you'll see that the two objects are no longer joined, that they are indeed sitting with each other, and that their contour line is not being broken. All right, now the other thing also that you'll notice is that as I'm swinging around and I'm trying to like zoom in on this little area, I'm not able to. The camera's moving too fast. So over here in the top right hand corner, what you'll actually see if you hover your mouse over that is something that says camera speed. Right now we're at the default of 4. If I slow this down to, let's say, 1, you can see now that as I move around, my camera is now moving much slower, and I can actually zoom in very close and see if those edges are actually touching. If for the reverse reason, I might need to move very fast. Let's say I'm working on a exterior outside level and I need to go from where the castle is to where something else is in the distance. That obviously speed would take forever to move the camera to the new location. So you are able to zip around using the 8. 4 is good as a medium between, so you get to zoom in pretty close and zoom around just if you need to zoom in even closer, slow the camera down, so then that way you have more control over what you're seeing on the screen as you move around. Okay, so let's move this back to 4 and let's take a look at our object again. So if I select the object, we are familiar now with the X, Y, and Z with the points. Now, if I hit my space bar, what I want you to notice is that now we have a slightly different tool. Whoops. What we do see is that we still have the red. So we have the X-axis, the Z-axis, and the Y-axis for this object. And if I was to actually pull on this object now, I would be moving in increments and changing the rotation of this object. So if I moved it back to 90 degrees, we now have flipped the box. If it had a material on there, the materials might now be facing in a slightly different direction. When we did this, when we hit the space bar, you'll notice that we went from this tool right here, which does have its own shortcut, which is the W tool. So if you hit W, you would get this tool. We switched over to the rotation tool, which is E. So if we hit E on the keyboard, we would get that. If we hit W, we would get the other. And I think the last one is the rotation, and we'll get, the scaling tool, but we'll get to that in just a minute. So E gives us rotation, and we can either use the shortcuts up there, or we can use the space bar down here at the bottom, and we can actually cycle through those tools. So with rotation, you can actually grab the object, move it one direction, grab the object, move it another, grab the object, and move it like that. So now you can see that the orientation of this object is now separate from the orientation of the other objects. Now, the other thing that I can also do with this, if I needed a specific rotation, you saw that I was moving in degrees of 5. So if I click here on the button where it says 5 degrees and change this, let's say, to 15, every time I make a move, it is now 15 degrees between one move and the other. And I could go into common, different divisions of, and then if we needed to, we could actually turn the snapping tool off. So we saw how this was orange. If I click on that, basically what I'm doing is I'm disengaging this from the grid, and now I'm able to freely move this around and get much more fluid, much more smooth movements, and you'll see that I'm actually going into decimal places. So if you needed to get that detailed, or if there was an object that you really wanted to spin around and you didn't want to do it on a degree or an axis, you could do that. If we reinstate that, we would then get our axes back, and we would be moving back in degrees of whatever we have chosen for that number. So the next thing that we can do is we can actually use the scalar tool. Again, you can use the space bar, or you can hit the R key on your keyboard. So space bar will get you there, or hitting R will go directly there. So what we see is we get our X, Y, and Z tool back. Let me just fix the rotation on this so that the tool is closer. There we go. So we have our Z tool, our X, Y, and Z tool. And remember that the first way they were with the points, now they have squares. Now when they have squares, essentially what you're doing is you're able to change the object in that direction. So if it's a static mesh, I will be able to select that object and pull, let's say, on one direction and increase the size. And when we do, we will notice that scale actually changes over here. So we now went from 5 point, let's see, what was that? That was the red one. So it was 1.5, and we've moved it to 5.5 in degrees. So we can create a flat skinny object, then grab that object, move it up in space, and now we've created a platform. So if you were going to create a platform game and you needed something to move up and down, now you have the platform made from the static mesh that you could use. This could also be a ceiling, it could be a floor, it could be many, many different things depending on where it was on the screen. But now using the X, Y, and Z tool, we are able to move this object around, change its shape, size, scale in relationship to other objects. And now we have something that looks very different from the box that it originally was. Okay, so just as a very quick recap, what we've looked at so far is how to move around on the screen, which is a combination of either your left or right click and your WASD tools to move your perspective around on screen. We've seen that we can select an object, and if we navigate through the space bar, we get the 3 different tools that we need. And based on what we want to do with that object, either move its location, rotate it, or change its shape or size or scale, we would be able to do that using those 3 tools. So there we go. And also we learned about how to use those tools up here in the top bar, and then also how to change your camera speed so that you can adjust things to be able to zoom in or out of an area that you're working in. All right, so I hope you've enjoyed the video, and you guys have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.